Book 5, Chapter 7 of Last Days of Pompeii. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Philippa. Last Days of Pompeii by Edward George Bulwer-Lytton. Book 5, Chapter 7. The Progress of the Destruction. The cloud, which had scattered so deep a murkiness over the day, had now settled into a solid and impenetrable mass. It resembled less even the thickest gloom of a night in the open air than the close and blind darkness of some narrow room. But in proportion as the blackness gathered, did the lightnings around Vesuvius increase in their vivid and scorching glare. Nor was their horrible beauty confined to the usual hues of fire. No rainbow ever rivalled their varying and prodigal dyes, now brightly blue as the most azure depth of a southern sky, now of a livid and snake-like green, darting restlessly to and fro as the folds of an enormous serpent, now of a lurid and intolerable crimson, gushing forth through the columns of smoke, far and wide, and lighting up the whole city from arch to arch, then suddenly dying into a sickly paleness, like the ghost of their own life. In the pauses of the showers, you heard the rumbling of the earth beneath, and the groaning waves of the tortured sea, or, lower still, and audible but to the watch of intensest fear, the grinding and hissing murmur of the escaping gases through the chasms of the distant mountain. Sometimes the cloud appeared to break from its solid mass, and, by the lightning, to assume quaint and vast mimicries of human or of monster shapes, striding across the gloom, hurtling one upon the other, and vanishing swiftly into the turbulent abyss of shade, so that, to the eyes and fancies of the affrighted wanderers, the unsubstantial vapours were as the bodily forms of gigantic foes, the agents of terror and of death. The ashes in many places were already knee-deep, and the boiling showers which came from the steaming breath of the volcano forced their way into the houses, bearing with them a strong and suffocating vapour. In some places immense fragments of rock, hurled upon the house roofs, bore down along the street masses of confused ruin, which yet more and more with every hour obstructed the way, and as the day advanced, the motion of the earth was more sensibly felt. The footings seemed to slide and creep, nor could chariot or litter be kept steady even on the most level ground. Sometimes the huger stones, striking against each other as they fell, broke into countless fragments, emitting sparks of fire which caught whatever was combustible within their reach, and along the plains beyond the city the darkness was now terribly relieved, for several houses and even vineyards had been set on flames, and at various intervals the fires rose suddenly and fiercely against the solid gloom. To add to this partial relief of the darkness, the citizens had here and there, in the more public places, such as the porticos of temples and the entrances to the forum, endeavoured to place rows of torches, but these rarely continued long. The showers and the winds extinguished them, and the sudden darkness into which their sudden birth was converted had something in it doubly terrible, and doubly impressing on the impotence of human hopes the lesson of despair. Frequently, by the momentary light of these torches, parties of fugitives encountered each other, some hurrying towards the sea, others flying from the sea back to the land, for the ocean had retreated rapidly from the shore. An utter darkness lay over it, and upon its groaning and tossing waves the storm of cinders and rock fell without the protection which the streets and roofs afforded to the land. Wild, haggard, ghastly with supernatural fears, these groups encountered each other, but without the leisure to speak, to consult, to advise, for the showers fell now frequently, though not continuously, extinguishing the lights which showed to each band the death-like faces of the other, and hurrying all to seek refuge beneath the nearest shelter. The whole elements of civilization were broken up. Ever and anon, by the flickering lights, You saw the thief hastening by the most solemn authorities of the law, laden with, and fearfully chuckling over, the produce of his sudden gains. If in the darkness wife was separated from husband, or parent from child, vain was the hope of reunion. Each hurried blindly and confusedly on. Nothing in all the various and complicated machinery of social life was left, save the primal law of self-preservation. Through this awful scene did the Athenian wade his way, accompanied by Ione and the blind girl. Suddenly a rush of hundreds in their path to the sea swept by them. Nydia was torn from the side of Glaucus, who with Ione was borne rapidly onward, and when the crowd, whose forms they saw not, so thick was the gloom, were gone, Nydia was still separated from their side. Glaucus shouted her name. No answer came. They retraced their steps. In vain. They could not discover her. It was evident she had been swept along some opposite direction by the human current. Their friend, their preserver, was lost. And hitherto Nydia had been their guide. Her blindness rendered the scene familiar to her alone. Accustomed through a perpetual night to thread the windings of the city, she had led them unerringly towards the seashore, by which they had resolved to hazard an escape. Now which way could they wend? All was rayless to them, a maze without a clue. Wearied, despondent, bewildered, they, however, passed along, the ashes falling upon their heads, the fragmentary stones dashing up in sparkles before their feet. "Alas, alas," murmured Ione, "I can go no farther. My steps sink among the scorching cinders. Fly, dearest, beloved, fly, and leave me to my fate." "Hush, my betrothed, my bride. Death with thee is sweeter than life without thee. Yet whither, oh, whither can we direct ourselves through the gloom? Already it seems that we have made but a circle and are in the very spot which we quitted an hour ago. O gods, yon rock, see, it hath riven the roof before us. It is death to move through the streets. Blessed lightning, see, Ione, see, the portico of the Temple of Fortune is before us. Let us creep beneath it, it will protect us from the showers." He caught his beloved in his arms, and with difficulty and labour gained the temple. He bore her to the remoter and more sheltered part of the portico, and leaned over her that he might shield her with his own form from the lightning and the showers. The beauty and the unselfishness of love could hallow even that dismal time. "Who is there?" said the trembling and hollow voice of one who had preceded them into their place of refuge. "Yet what matters? The crush of the ruined world forbids us to friends or foes." Ione turned at the sound of the voice, and with a faint shriek cowered again beneath the arms of Glaucus. And he, looking in the direction of the voice, beheld the cause of her alarm. Through the darkness glared forth two burning eyes. The lightning flashed and lingered athwart the temple, and Glaucus, with a shudder, perceived the lion to which he had been doomed couched beneath the pillars, and close beside it, unwitting of the vicinity, lay the giant form of him who had accosted them, the wounded gladiator, Niger. That lightning had revealed to each other the form of beast and man, yet the instinct of both was quelled. Nay, the lion crept nearer and nearer to the gladiator, as for companionship, and the gladiator did not recede or tremble. The revolution of nature had dissolved her lighter terrors as well as her wonted ties. While they were thus terribly protected, a group of men and women bearing torches passed by the temple. They were the congregation of the Nazarenes, and a sublime and unearthly emotion had not, indeed, quelled their awe, but it had robbed awe of fear. They had long believed, according to the error of the early Christians, that the last day was at hand. They imagined now that the day had come. "Woe, woe!" cried in a shrill and piercing voice the elder at their head. Behold, the Lord descendeth to judgment. He maketh fire come down from heaven in the sight of men. Woe, woe, ye strong and mighty! Woe to ye of the fasces and the purple! Woe to the idolater and the worshipper of the beast! Woe to ye who pour forth the blood of saints and gloat over the death pangs of the sons of God! Woe to the harlot of the sea! Woe, woe! And with a loud and deep chorus the troop chanted forth along the wild horrors of the air, Woe to the harlot of the sea! Woe, woe! The Nazarenes paced slowly on, their torches still flickering in the storm, their voices still raised in menace and solemn warning, till, lost amid the windings in the streets, the darkness of the atmosphere and the silence of death again fell over the scene. There was one of the frequent pauses in the showers, and Glaucus encouraged Ione once more to proceed. Just as they stood, hesitating, on the last step of the portico, an old man with a bag in his right hand and leaning upon a youth tottered by. The youth bore a torch. Glaucus recognized the two as father and son, miser and prodigal. "Father," said the youth, "if you cannot move more swiftly, I must leave you, or we both perish." "Fly, boy, then, and leave thy sire." "But I cannot fly to starve. Give me thy bag of gold." And the youth snatched at it. "Wretch, wouldst thou rob thy father?" "Aye, who can tell the tale in this hour? Miser, perish." The boy struck the old man to the ground, plucked the bag from his relaxing hand, and fled onward with a shrill yell. "Ye gods!" cried Glaucus, "are ye blind then, even in the dark? Such crimes may well confound the guiltless with the guilty in one common ruin. Ione, on, on!" End of Book 5, Chapter 7.
Book 5, Chapter 8 of Last Days of Pompeii. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Last Days of Pompeii by Edward G. Bulwer-Lytton. Book 5, Chapter 8. Arbaces encounters Glaucus and Ione. Advancing, as men grope for escape in a dungeon, Ione and her lover continued their uncertain way. At the moments when the volcanic lightnings lingered over the streets, they were enabled by that awful light to steer and guide their progress. Yet little did the view it presented to them cheer or encourage their path. In parts where the ashes lay dry and uncommixed with the boiling torrents, cast upward from the mountain at capricious intervals, the surface of the earth presented a leprous and ghastly white. In other places cinder and rock lay matted in heaps, from beneath which emerged the half-hid limbs of some crushed and mangled fugitive. The groans of the dying were broken by wild shrieks of woman's terror, now near, now distant, which when heard in the utter darkness were rendered doubly appalling by the crushing sense of helplessness and the uncertainty of the perils around. And clear and distinct through all were the mighty and various noises from the fatal mountain, its rushing winds, its whirling torrents, and from time to time the burst and roar of some more fiery and fierce explosion. And ever as the winds swept howling along the street, they bore sharp streams of burning dust, and such sickening and poisonous vapours as took away for the instant breath and consciousness, followed by a rapid revulsion of the arrested blood, and a tingling sensation of agony trembling through every nerve and fibre of the frame. "O Glaucus, my beloved, my own, take me to thy arms. One embrace. Let me feel thy arms around me, and in that embrace let me die. I can no more." "For my sake, for my life, courage yet, sweet Ione. My life is linked with thine. And see, torches, this way. Lo, how they brave the wind, Ha! They live through the storm. Doubtless fugitives to the sea, we will join them. As if to aid and reanimate the lovers, the winds and showers came to a sudden pause. The atmosphere was profoundly still. The mountain seemed at rest, gathering perhaps fresh fury for its next burst. The torch-bearers moved quickly on. "We are nearing the sea," said in a calm voice the person at their head. "Liberty and wealth to each slave who survives this day. Courage! I tell you that the gods themselves have assured me of deliverance. On!" Redly and steadily the torches flashed full on the eyes of Glaucus and Ione, who lay trembling and exhausted on his bosom. Several slaves were bearing by the light panniers and coffers heavily laden. In front of them, a drawn sword in his hand, towered the lofty form of Arbaces. "By my fathers," cried the Egyptian, "fate smiles upon me even through these horrors, and amidst the dreadest aspects of woe and death, bodes me happiness and love. Away, Greek! I claim my word, Ione." "Traitor and murderer!" cried Glaucus, glaring upon his foe. "Nemesis has guided thee to my revenge, a just sacrifice to the shades of Hades, that now seem loosed on earth. Approach! Touch but the hand of Ione, and thy weapon shall be as reed. I will tear thee limb from limb." Suddenly as he spoke, the place became lighted with an intense and lurid glow. Bright and gigantic through the darkness which closed around it like the walls of hell, the mountain shone, a pile of fire. Its summit seemed riven in two, or rather, above its surface there seemed to rise two monster shapes, each confronting each, as demons contending for a world. These were of one deep blood-red hue of fire, which lighted up the whole atmosphere far and wide. But below, the nether part of the mountain was still dark and shrouded, save in 3 places, down which flowed, serpentine and irregular, rivers of the molten lava. Darkly red through the profound gloom of their banks, they flowed slowly on, as towards the devoted city. Over the broadest there seemed to spring a cragged and stupendous arch, from which, as from the jaws of hell, gushed the sources of the sudden Phlegethon. And through the stilled air was heard the rattling of the fragments of rock, hurtling one upon another as they were borne down the fiery cataracts, darkening for one instant the spot where they fell, and suffused the next in the burnished hues of a flood along which they floated. The slaves shrieked aloud, and covering hid their faces. The Egyptian himself stood transfixed to the spot, the glow lighting up his commanding features and jewelled robes. High behind him rose a tall column that supported the bronze statue of Augustus, and the imperial image seemed changed to a shape of fire. With his left hand circled round the form of Ione, with his right arm raised in menace, and grasping the stylus which was to have been his weapon in the arena, and which he still fortunately bore about him, with his brow knit, his lips apart, the wrath and menace of human passions arrested as by a charm upon his features, Glaucus fronted the Egyptian. Arbaces turned his eyes from the mountain. They rested on the form of Glaucus. He paused a moment. "Why," he muttered, "should I hesitate? Did not the stars foretell the only crisis of imminent peril to which I was subjected? Is not that peril past?" "The soul," cried he aloud, "can brave the wreck of worlds and the wrath of imaginary gods. By that soul will I conquer to the last. Advance, slaves! Athenian, resist me, and thy blood be on thine own head. Thus then I regain Ione." He advanced one step. It was his last on earth. The ground shook beneath him with a convulsion that cast all around upon its surface. A simultaneous crash resounded through the city, as down toppled many a roof and pillar. The lightning, as if caught by the metal, lingered an instant on the imperial statue, then shivered bronze and column. Down fell the ruin, echoing along the street, and riving the solid pavement where it crashed. The prophecy of the stars was fulfilled. The sound, the shock, stunned the Athenian for several moments. When he recovered, the light still illuminated the scene. The earth still slid and trembled beneath. Ione lay senseless on the ground, but he saw her not yet. His eyes were fixed upon a ghastly face that seemed to emerge, without limbs or trunk, from the huge fragments of the scattered column. A face of unutterable pain, agony, and despair. The eyes shut and opened rapidly, as if sense were not yet fled. The lips quivered and grinned. Then sudden stillness and darkness fell over the features, yet retaining that aspect of horror never to be forgotten. So perished the wise magician, the great Arbaces, the Hermes of the burning belt, the last of the royalty of Egypt. End of Book 5, Chapter 8. Book 5, Chapter 9 of Last Days of Pompeii. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Last Days of Pompeii by Edward G. Bulwer-Lytton. Book 5, Chapter 9. The Despair of the Lovers, the Condition of the Multitude. Glaucus turned in gratitude, but in awe, caught Ione once more in his arms, and fled along the street that was yet intensely luminous. But suddenly a duller shade fell over the air. Instinctively he turned to the mountain, and beheld one of the two gigantic crests into which the summit had been divided, rocked and wavered to and fro, and then with a sound the mightiness of which no language can describe, it fell from its burning base, and rushed, an avalanche of fire, down the sides of the mountain. At the same instant gushed forth a volume of blackest smoke, rolling on over air, sea, and earth. Another, and another, and another shower of ashes, far more profuse than before, scattered fresh desolation along the streets. Darkness once more wrapped them as a veil, and Glaucus, his bold heart at last quelled and despairing, sank beneath the cover of an arch, and clasping Ione to his heart, a bride on that couch of ruin, resigned himself to die. Meanwhile Nydia, once separated by the throng from Glaucus and Ione, had in vain endeavoured to regain them. In vain she raised the plaintive cry so peculiar to the blind. It was lost amidst a thousand shrieks of more selfish terror. Again and again she returned to the spot where they had been divided, to find her companions gone, to seize every fugitive, to inquire of Glaucus, to be dashed aside in the impatience of distraction. Who in that hour spared one thought to his neighbour? Perhaps in scenes of universal horror, nothing is more horrid than the unnatural selfishness they engender. At length it occurred to Nydia that as it had been resolved to seek the seashore for escape, her most probable chance of rejoining her companions would be to persevere in that direction. Guiding her steps, then, by the staff which she always carried, she continued, with incredible dexterity, to avoid the masses of ruin that encumbered the path, to thread the streets, and unerringly, so blessed now was that accustomed darkness, so afflicting in ordinary life, to take the nearest direction to the seaside. Poor girl! Her courage was beautiful to behold, and fate seemed to favour one so helpless. The boiling torrents touched her not, save by the general rain which accompanied them. The huge fragments of scoria shivered the pavement before and beside her, but spared that frail form, and when the lesser ashes fell over her, she shook them away with a slight tremor, and dauntlessly resumed her course. Weak, exposed, yet fearless, supported but by one wish, she was the very emblem of Psyche in her wanderings, of hope, walking through the valley of the shadow, of the soul itself, lone but undaunted, amidst the dangers and the snares of life. Her path was, however, constantly impeded by the crowds that now groped amidst the gloom, now fled in the temporary glare of the lightnings across the scene, and at length, a group of torch-bearers rushing full against her, she was thrown down with some violence. "What," said the voice of one of the party, "is this the brave blind girl? By Bacchus, she must not be left here to die. Up, my Thessalian. So. Are you hurt? That's well. Come along with us. We are for the shore." "O Sallust, is it thy voice? The gods be thanked. Glaucus, 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 have ye seen him?" "Not I. He is doubtless out of the city by this time. The gods who saved him from the lion will save him from the burning mountain." As the kindly epicure thus encouraged Nydia, he drew her along with him towards the sea, heeding not her passionate entreaties that he would linger yet a while to search for Glaucus. And still as the accent of despair, she continued to shriek out that beloved name, which amidst all the roar of the convulsed elements kept alive a music at her heart. The sudden illumination, the burst of the floods of lava, and the earthquake, which we have already described, chanced when Sallust and his party had just gained the direct path leading from the city to the port, and here they were arrested by an immense crowd, more than half the population of the city. They spread along the field without the walls, thousands upon thousands, uncertain whither to fly. The sea had retired far from the shore, and they who had fled to it had been so terrified by the agitation and preternatural shrinking of the element, the gasping forms of the uncouth sea things which the waves had left upon the sand, and by the sound of the huge stones cast from the mountain into the deep, that they had returned again to the land, as presenting the less frightful aspect of the two. Thus the two streams of human beings, the one seaward, the other from the sea, had met together, feeling a sad comfort in numbers, arrested in despair and doubt. "The world is to be destroyed by fire," said an old man in long loose robes, a philosopher of the Stoic school. Stoic and Epicurean wisdom have alike agreed in this prediction, and the hour is come. "Yea, the hour is come," cried a loud voice, solemn but not fearful. Those around turned in dismay. The voice came from above them. It was the voice of Olynthus, who, surrounded by his Christian friends, stood upon an abrupt eminence on which the old Greek colonists had raised a temple to Apollo, now time-worn and half in ruin. As he spoke there came that sudden illumination which had heralded the death of Arbaces, and glowing over that mighty multitude, aved, crouching, breathless, never on earth had the faces of men seemed so haggard, never had meeting of mortal beings been so stamped with the horror and sublimity of dread. Never till the last trumpet sounds shall such meeting be seen again. And above those the form of Olynthus, with outstretched arm and prophet brow, girt with the living fires. And the crowd knew the face of him they had doomed to the fangs of the beast, then their victim, now their warner. And through the stillness again came his ominous voice, "The hour is come." The Christians repeated the cry. It was caught up. It was echoed from side to side. Woman and man, childhood and old age, repeated, not aloud but in a smothered and dreary murmur, "The hour is come." At that moment a wild yell burst through the air, and thinking only of escape, whither it knew not, the terrible tiger of the desert leaped amongst the throng, and hurried through its parted streams. And so came the earthquake, and so darkness once more fell over the earth. And now new fugitives arrived, grasping the treasures no longer destined for their lord. The slaves of Arbaces joined the throng. One only of all their torches yet flickered on. It was borne by Sosia, and its light falling on the face of Nydia, he recognized the Cythalian. "What avails thy liberty now, blind girl?" said the slave. "Who art thou? Canst thou tell me of Glaucus?" "Ay, I saw him but a few minutes since." "Blessed be thy head! Where?" "Crouched beneath the arch of the forum, dead or dying, gone to rejoin Arbaces, who is no more." Nydia uttered not a word. She slid from the side of Sallust. Silently she glided through those behind her, and retraced her steps to the city. She gained the forum, the arch, she stooped down, she felt around, she called on the name of Glaucus. A weak voice answered, "Who calls on me? Is it the voice of the Shades? Lo, I am prepared." "Arise, follow me, take my hand. Glaucus, thou shalt be saved." In wonder and sudden hope, Glaucus arose. "Nydia still? Ah, thou then art safe." The tender joy of his voice pierced the heart of the poor Thessalian, and she blessed him for his thought of her. Half leading, half carrying Ione, Glaucus followed his guide. With admirable discretion she avoided the path which led to the crowd she had just quitted, and by another route sought the shore. After many pauses and incredible perseverance, they gained the sea, and joined a group, who, bolder than the rest, resolved to hazard any peril rather than continue in such a scene. In darkness they put forth to sea, but as they cleared the land and caught new aspects of the mountain, its channels of molten fire threw a partial redness over the waves. Utterly exhausted and worn out, Ione slept on the breast of Glaucus, and Nydia lay at his feet. Meanwhile the showers of dust and ashes, still borne aloft, fell into the wave, and scattered their snows over the deck. Far and wide, borne by the winds, those showers descended upon the remotest climes, startling even the swarthy African, and whirled along the antique soil of Syria and of Egypt. Dion Cassius. End of Book 5, Chapter 9.
Book 5, Chapter 10 of Last Days of Pompeii. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Philippa. Last Days of Pompeii by Edward G. Bulwer-Lytton. Book 5, Chapter 10. The next morning, the fate of Nydia. And meekly, softly, beautifully dawned at last the light over the trembling deep. The winds were sinking into rest. The foam died from the glowing azure of that delicious sea. Around the east, thin mists caught gradually the rosy hues that heralded the morning. Light was about to resume her reign. Yet still, dark and massive in the distance, lay the broken fragments of the destroying cloud, from which red streaks, burning dimlier and more dim, betrayed the yet rolling fires of the mountain of the scorched fields. The white walls and gleaming columns that had adorned the lovely coasts were no more. Sullen and dull were the shores so lately crested by the cities of Herculaneum and Pompeii. The darlings of the deep were snatched from her embrace. Century after century shall the mighty mother stretch forth her azure arms, and know them not, moaning round the sepulchres of the lost. There was no shout from the mariners at the dawning light. It had come too gradually, and they were too wearied for such sudden bursts of joy. But there was a low, deep murmur of thankfulness amidst those watchers of the long night. They looked at each other and smiled. They took heart. They felt once more that there was a world around and a God above them. And in the feeling that the worst was past, the over-wearied ones turned round and fell placidly to sleep. In the growing light of the skies there came the silence which night had wanted, and the bark drifted calmly onward to its port. A few other vessels bearing similar fugitives might be seen in the expanse, apparently motionless, yet gliding also on. There was a sense of security, of companionship, and of hope in the sight of their slender masts and white sails. What beloved friends, lost and missed in the gloom, might they not bear to safety and to shelter? In the silence of the general sleep, Nydia rose gently. She bent over the face of Glaucus. She inhaled the deep breath of his heavy slumber. Timidly and sadly she kissed his brow, his lips. She felt for his hand. It was locked in that of Ione. She sighed deeply, and her face darkened. Again she kissed his brow, and with her hair wiped from it the damps of night. "May the gods bless you, Athenian," she murmured. "May you be happy with your beloved one. May you sometimes remember Nydia. Alas, she is of no further use on earth." With these words she turned away. Slowly she crept along by the phori or platforms to the farther side of the vessel, and pausing, bent low over the deep. The cool spray dashed upward on her feverish brow. "It is the kiss of death," said she. "It is welcome." The balmy air played through her waving tresses. She put them from her face, and raised those eyes, so tender though so lightless, to the sky, whose soft face she had never seen. "No, no," she said, half aloud, and in a musing and thoughtful tone. "I cannot endure it. This jealous, exacting love. It shatters my whole soul in madness. I might harm him again. Wretch that I was. I have saved him, twice saved him. Happy, happy thought. Why not die happy? It is the last glad thought I can ever know. Oh, sacred sea, I hear thy voice invitingly. It hath a freshening and joyous call. They say that in thy embrace is dishonour, that thy victims cross not the fatal Styx. Be it so. I would not meet him in the shades, for I should meet him still with her. Rest, rest, rest. There is no other Elysium for a heart like mine." A sailor, half dozing on the deck, heard a slight splash on the waters. Drowsily he looked up, and behind, as the vessel merrily bounded on, he fancied he saw something white above the waves, but it vanished in an instant. He turned round again, and dreamed of his home and children. When the lovers awoke, their first thought was of each other, their next of Nydia. She was not to be found. None had seen her since the night. Every crevice of the vessel was searched. There was no trace of her. Mysterious from first to last, the blind Thessalian had vanished for ever from the living world. They guessed her fate in silence, and Glaucus and Ione, while they drew nearer to each other, feeling each other the world itself, forgot their deliverance, and wept as for a departed sister. End of Book 5, Chapter 10.
Book 5, Chapters the Last, of Last Days of Pompeii. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Last Days of Pompeii by Edward G. Bulwer-Lytton. Book 5, Chapter the Last. Where in all things cease. Letter from Glaucus to Sallust, 10 years after the destruction of Pompeii. Athens. Glaucus to his beloved Sallust. Greeting and health. You request me to visit you at Rome. No, Sallust, come rather to me at Athens. I have forsworn the imperial city, its mighty tumult and hollow joys. In my own land henceforth I dwell for ever. The ghost of our departed greatness is dearer to me than the gaudy life of your loud prosperity. There is a charm to me which no other spot can supply, in the porticos hallowed still by holy and venerable shades. In the olive groves of Ulysses I still hear the voice of poetry. On the heights of Philae the clouds of twilight seem yet the shrouds of departed freedom, the heralds of the morrow that shall come. You smile at my enthusiasm, Sallust. Better be hopeful in chains than resigned to their glitter. You tell me you are sure that I cannot enjoy life in these melancholy haunts of a fallen majesty. You dwell with rapture in the Roman splendours and the luxuries of the imperial court. My Sallust, non sum qualis eram. I am not what I was. The events of my life have sobered the bounding blood of my youth. My health has never quite recovered its wonted elasticity ere it felt the pangs of disease, and languished in the damps of a criminal's dungeon. My mind has never shaken off the dark shadow of the last day of Pompeii, the horror and the desolation of that awful ruin. Our beloved, our remembered Nydia, I have reared a tomb to her shade, and I see it every day from the window of my study. It keeps alive in me a tender recollection, a not unpleasing sadness, which are but a fitting homage to her fidelity, and the mysteriousness of her early death. Ione gathers the flowers, but my own hand wreathes them daily around the tomb. She is worthy of a tomb in Athens. You speak of the growing sect of the Christians in Rome. Sallust, to you I may confide my secret. I have pondered much over that faith. I have adopted it. After the destruction of Pompeii, I met once more with Olynthus, saved, alas, only for a day, and falling afterwards a martyr to the indomitable energy of his zeal. In my preservation from the lion and the earthquake, he taught me to behold the hand of the unknown God. I listened, believed, adored. My own, my more than ever beloved Ione has also embraced the creed. A creed, Sallust, which, shedding light over this world, gathers its concentrated glory, like a sunset over the next. We know that we are united in the soul, as in the flesh, for ever and for ever. Ages may roll on, our very dust be dissolved, the earth shrivelled like a scroll, but round and round the circle of eternity rolls the wheel of life, imperishable, unceasing. And as the earth from the sun, so immortality drinks happiness from virtue, which is the smile upon the face of God. Visit me, then, Sallust. Bring with you the learned scrolls of Epicurus, Pythagoras, Diogenes. Arm yourself for defeat, and let us, amidst the groves of Academus, dispute, under a surer guide than any granted to our fathers, on the mighty problem of the true ends of life and the nature of the soul. Ione, at that name my heart yet beats. Ione is by my side as I write. I lift my eyes and meet her smile. The sunlight quivers over Hymettus, and along my garden I hear the hum of the summer bees. Am I happy, ask you? Oh, what can Rome give me equal to what I possess at Athens? Here everything awakens the soul and inspires the affections. The trees, the waters, the hills, the skies are those of Athens, fair, though mourning mother, of the poetry and the wisdom of the world. In my hall I see the marble faces of my ancestors. In the Ceramicus I survey their tombs. In the streets I behold the hand of Phidias and the soul of Pericles. Harmodius, Aristogiton, they are everywhere, but in our hearts. In mine at least they shall not perish. If anything can make me forget that I am an Athenian and not free, it is partly the soothing, the love, watchful, vivid, sleepless, of Ione, a love that has taken a new sentiment in our new creed, a love which none of our poets, beautiful though they be, had shadowed forth in description. For mingled with religion, it partakes of religion. It is blended with pure and unworldly thoughts. It is that which we may hope to carry through eternity, and keep therefore white and unsullied, that we may not blush to confess it to our God. This is the true type of the dark fable of our Grecian Eros and Psyche. It is, in truth, the soul asleep in the arms of love. And if this our love support me partly against the fever of the desire for freedom, my religion supports me more, for whenever I would grasp the sword and sound the shell, and rush to new marathon, but marathon without victory, I feel my despair at the chilling thought of my country's impotence, the crushing weight of the Roman yoke, comforted at least by the thought that earth is but the beginning of life, that the glory of a few years matters little in the vast space of eternity, that there is no perfect freedom till the chains of clay fall from the soul, and all space, all time become its heritage and domain. Yet Sallust, some mixture of the soft Greek blood still mingles with my faith. I can share not the zeal of those who see crime and eternal wrath in men who cannot believe as they. I shudder not at the creed of others. I dare not curse them. I pray the Great Father to convert. This lukewarmness exposes me to some suspicion amongst the Christians, but I forgive it, and not offending openly the prejudices of the crowd, I am thus enabled to protect my brethren from the danger of the law, and the consequences of their own zeal. If moderation seem to me the natural creature of benevolence, it gives also the greatest scope to beneficence. Such then, O Sallust, is my life, such my opinions. In this manner I greet existence and await death. And thou, glad-hearted and kindly pupil of Epicurus, thou! But come hither, and see what enjoyments, what hopes are ours, and not the splendour of imperial banquets, nor the shouts of the crowded circus, nor the noisy forum, nor the glittering theatre, nor the luxuriant gardens, nor the voluptuous baths of Rome, shall seem to thee to constitute a life of more vivid and uninterrupted happiness than that which thou so unreasonably pitiest as the career of Glaucus the Athenian. Farewell. Nearly 17 centuries had rolled away when the city of Pompeii was disinterred from its silent tomb, all vivid with undimmed hues, its walls fresh as if painted yesterday, not a hue faded on the rich mosaic of its floors, in its forum the half-finished columns as left by the workman's hand, in its gardens the sacrificial tripod, in its halls the chest of treasure, in its baths the strigil, in its theatres the counter of admission, in its saloons the furniture and the lamp, in its triclinia the fragments of the last feast, in its cubicula the perfumes and the rogue of faded beauty, and everywhere the bones and skeletons of those who once moved the springs of that minute yet gorgeous machine of luxury and of life. In the house of Diomed, in the subterranean vaults, 20 skeletons, one of a babe, were discovered in one spot by the door, covered by a fine ashen dust that had evidently been wafted slowly through the apertures until it had filled the whole space. There were jewels and coins, candelabra for unavailing light, and wine hardened in the amphora for a prolongation of agonized life. The sand, consolidated by damps, had taken the forms of the skeletons as in a cast, and the traveller may yet see the impression of a female neck and bosom, of young and round proportions, the trace of the fated Julia. It seems to the inquirer as if the air had been gradually changed into a sulphurous vapour. The inmates of the vaults had rushed to the door, to find it closed and blocked up by the scoria without, and in their attempts to force it, had been suffocated with the atmosphere. In the garden was found a skeleton with a key by its bony hand, and near it a bag of coins. This is believed to have been the master of the house, the unfortunate Diomed, who had probably sought to escape by the garden, and been destroyed either by the vapours or some fragment of stone. Beside some silver vases lay another skeleton, probably of the slave. The houses of Sallust and of Pansa, the temple of Isis, with the juggling concealments behind the statues, the lurking place of its holy oracles, are now bared to the gaze of the curious. In one of the chambers of that temple was found a huge skeleton with an axe beside it. 2 walls had been pierced by the axe. The victim could penetrate no further. In the midst of the city was found another skeleton, by the side of which was a heap of coins, and many of the mystic ornaments of the fane of Isis. Death had fallen upon him in his avarice, and Calonus perished simultaneously with Burbo. As the excavators cleared on through the mass of ruin, they found the skeleton of a man, literally severed in 2 by a prostrate column. The skull was of so striking a conformation, so boldly marked in its intellectual as well as its worse physical developments, that it has excited the constant speculation of every itinerant believer in the theories of Sportsheim, who has gazed upon that ruined palace of the mind. Still, after the lapse of ages, the traveller may survey that airy hall, within whose cunning galleries and elaborate chambers once thought, reasoned, dreamed, and sinned, the soul of Arbaces the Egyptian. Viewing the various witnesses of a social system which has passed from the world by ever, a stranger, from that remote and barbarian isle which the imperial Roman shivered when he named, posed amidst the delights of the soft Campania, and composed this history. End of Book 5, Chapter the Last. And this is also the end of The Last Days of Pompeii by Edward G. Bulwer-Lytton.